Look, it's my Pennsylvania mug.
Hey, y'all.
Greetings.
Oh, here's Paige Simmons, Chris.
Hello.
Hello.
I got my green screen up, so I did a nice Japanese painting in the background on it.
Nice. So just to alert folks, this is going to be streaming on Facebook Live. So we've got a number of participants through that platform in addition to the Zoom. And we will be starting here in just a moment.
A very friendly, very respectful, very friendly reminder to please, for everyone who is not currently listed as a host or co-host or a guest, please stay muted in the background. We'd be grateful. And also a reminder to everyone who is here, at the end of the formal program at around 1:30, the room will remain open for continuing discussion, questions, exchanges. The Facebook feed will stop, but the room will remain open.
Welcome to our event today. This is the second gathering of Our Revolution PA this year. This is the Pennsylvania Grand Strategy Summit 2.0, and it is Saturday, May 22nd, just at 12 noon. And we find ourselves in extremely exciting times. My name is Chuck Pinocchio. I'm a co-founder of Our Revolution Pennsylvania, founded back in the summer of 2016. Following Bernie Sanders' run for the Democratic nomination in 2016, in which he ran for the purpose, really fundamentally, of restoring the progressive roots to the Democratic Party, getting the Democratic Party recentered on a people's agenda, what we call a justice for all agenda. So we've got a lot to work on to build our outside strategy. We're going to be talking today about encouraging people to run for school board positions, even to write in. And then next spring, we want to recruit an entire crop of folks to run for state committee. We'll be discussing that later on today as well. These are exciting times at local, state, and national levels. But it's also a time of concern with the rise and expansion of global fascism. And with that, that brings greater urgency to our work again, centered on our Justice for All agenda. We have today some fabulous guests. We've got Chris Rabb, Pennsylvania House Rep, 200 District, or District 200. We have Bethany Hallam, who's a county council member from Allegheny at large. And we've got Nikil Saval, Pennsylvania State Senate, District 1 here in Philadelphia. So we're thrilled to have those folks on board with us. Right now, we have a couple of victorious candidates from this past week that I'd like to call up just to say a few words. Paige Simmons is a magisterial judge-elect from Chester. Paige, do you want to come up?
Hi, yes, I'm Paige Simmons, and I'm from Chester County, PA. I just won my primary for magisterial district judge. My county has been traditionally Republican, so it's only been since, I want to say 2020, or maybe the primary before 2020, that we've actually tiny bit skewed blue. So this municipal race was important. This primary was important because it was a test to us to see if this was actual change or if this was more of an anti-Trump vote. So I'm very excited to have won my primary. And I want to say that I was a write-in. So it was not a foreclosed conclusion that I was going to win, but my specific zone really stepped up and we ran a grassroots campaign. I had no campaign manager, lots of lit drops, lots of Facebook, and we did it. So I think it's important for candidates like myself to not be afraid to run in counties like the ones that I live in that used to be that are majority Republican or used to be majority Republican, because I think, this is how we expand the change outside of Philly and outside of Pittsburgh and outside of those areas that are traditionally Democratic strongholds. And just one last thing, part of the reason why I ran is because I have a 21-year-old and I have a 22-year-old. My 21-year-old is a 21-year-old boy. And he's big and strong. He's 6'2" and he's 250 pounds. And I was kind of horrified when I heard some of the excuses being made about, oh, he's big and he's strong. And I was basically scared for some of the things that were done to some of these people that were arrested. So my level of judge would handle things like bail and warrant searches and issuing fines and issuing and jail for minor infractions. And I think it's important to have judges on that level who do not over sentence so that these kinds of things are not used as predicates for bigger for excuses. So that's my little spiel. So thank you so much for having me on. And I'm excited to get on to November.
Terrific, Paige. And drop your contact information in the chat for us so we can track you and stay connected. Thanks, Paige.
Will do.
Next up, we have Marianne Velez, Lucerne County Council. Marianne, tell us about your race. Are you muted, perhaps, Marianne? Is Marianne? Let's see. Marianne Velez, do you hear me? Did we lose Marianne?
I don't see her, Chuck, in the room.
Okay. If she comes in later, we'll just bring her in. And I guess the last thing to say before I toss it over to Hal is that we need to celebrate, and I know you want to talk about that as well, Hal, but this is a very exciting time and we've got momentum. We've got to build on it. And thanks everyone for joining Our Revolution Pennsylvania. And now to toss it over to our national partner and organizer for Pennsylvania, Hal Ginsberg. Welcome, Hal.
Thank you so much, Chuck, and I really appreciate this opportunity to speak briefly to the people in Our Revolution Pennsylvania and the activists on this call. I really do thank the folks, especially who put this together, Chuck, Kristen, Lisa. It's always a problem when you mention people and you're going to forget someone, but the entire team has just been tremendous, and I really thank them for the support they've offered us at National, and we really enjoy working with them. I'll be very, very brief. We have a slide up there to become a movement builder. That's rrev.us/PAMEM, OurRev. .us/PAMEM. You can see it on the screen there, and that helps us continue to put on great calls like this and speak to wonderful people across the country. And let me tell you about some of the things we've been doing just very, very briefly. And there's what we really want to, of course, celebrate right now in Pennsylvania is that awesome win on Tuesday. And it was a blowout too. He got twice as much. District Attorney Krasner reelected. We know, given Philadelphia demographics, he's almost a shoo-in to win the general. So the big race was that primary, and he was up against it. Former Democratic governor actually came out against District Attorney Krasner, and the people of Philadelphia, they know their district attorney. They know the great work he has done to decenter policing and to center a much more just way of protecting and serving the people in that city. So we are so excited that District Attorney Larry Krasner won the primary on Tuesday. And the work of this group, this team, I've seen it up close, was very, very important with the phone banking, the emails, and the like that got District Attorney Krasner over the top. Congratulations, Larry. We are fighting for the $15 minimum wage across the country. This was Wednesday on the Mall. You can see the Capitol. I was there, and it was a really exciting event. We are standing shoulder to shoulder with working people across this nation, and specifically now McDonald's workers who are fighting for a $15 minimum wage. It is the bare minimum that should be allowed in a country like ours, the richest in the world. One other policy we're fighting for right now, ending that filibuster. We want to get that minimum wage up to $15 across the country. We've got to take the Republicans out of that discussion, and we are fighting to tell Democrats, have a spine, end the filibuster now. And with that, I'm delighted to turn this over to my partner in the Philly Burbs, Karen Hollis. Hey, Karen.
Hi, everyone. I am so happy to be here with everybody celebrating. What a wonderful victory. And as you saw earlier, there were lots of people, progressive candidates across Pennsylvania that got elected. So we are on a roll and we are not stopping. We're very excited to have Senator Nikil Saval of PA District 1 with us today. And Nikil is a father, writer, and community organizer. And I think a minute ago, he had his brand new baby with him. I don't know. Let me see if I can. Yes, there he is.
Yeah, hi, Karen.
Let's see that beautiful boy, right?
Yeah, he just fell asleep. Yeah. There we go.
He is what, 3 months, 2 months? Not much.
Nearly 2. He's like 7 weeks. Yep.
Oh, how sweet. Well, let me introduce you. As I said, Nikil Saval is a father, writer, and community organizer who is the first Asian American to be elected Democratic ward leader in Philadelphia. He's proud to be raising his 2 sons in South Philly with his wife, Shannon. In 2009, he organized boycotts with Unite Here against luxury hotel developers to fight for the rights of housekeepers. In 2013, he won back jobs for 1,000 cafeteria workers and noontime aides who'd been laid off because of Corbett's budget cuts to the Philadelphia school district. In 2016, he was a leader in the Bernie Sanders campaign, and he co-founded Reclaim Philadelphia, the group that has been responsible for so many wonderful victories, progressive victories in Philly. In 2018, he organized campaigns to fight for change in the Democratic Party and became elected ward leader of the 2nd Ward. And then from there, it's been more forward and more victories, since he was elected senator from District 1. And I see a great future ahead for him in progressive politics. So thanks so much, Nikil, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you to Our Revolution. Really great to be here with like-minded folks. My colleague, Rep. Rabb, and Councilmember Hallam. So, I just wanted to speak. So I'm the state senator for the 1st district, but I know that one of the things that we're talking about today is, the importance of challenging and running people for, Democratic Party positions and trying to make changes and root ourselves as progressives, as people on the left within Democratic Party structures. And that was, at least no small part of my path to becoming a state senator. So although it was not planned in that way, it just happened to kind of tee things up. So just briefly, we're obviously celebrating the victory of Larry Krasner, his reelection. I'm so excited and so excited to have been part of that reelection, but also to have been part of his election in 2017. So one of the first things that Reclaim Philadelphia did in 2017 was that it was one of our earliest endorsements was Larry Krasner for district attorney. And in my neighborhood, in the 2nd ward in Philadelphia, we canvassed. I recruited canvassers. I knocked on dozens of, hundreds of doors myself for Larry Krasner, and he won despite not having the endorsement of the 2nd ward here with this section of the Democratic Party, and in fact did not have the endorsement of the party citywide. By no means had a handful of wards at, I would say he had the support of progressive, political figures like Rep. Rabb and others, but one of the thing that really worked was just grassroots organizing. And so what that made clear to us in the 2nd ward was that, we were kind of running circles around the Democratic Party. And you could either say that we don't need the party for that reason, and that's certainly true in some respects. But the other thing you might say is that that the party is there's power lying on the table, essentially, or like lying on the floor, that you could pick it up, that we could pick it up and make changes and actually take over those structures, because we may have won that year, but you don't always win. And so the party does still have power. It does still kind of drain resources and energy from a lot of people who might otherwise be putting effort into the kind of work that we want to do. So a lot of the volunteers that made up the base of the Krasner win, and before that, the win for Bernie Sanders, or at least he basically split the vote here with Hillary Clinton in 2016. We organized to run for local party positions for Democratic city committee. And then also some people ran for state committee. And state committee districts are basically the size of Senate districts. And 40 of us ran, and or rather several more than that, but for about 40 of us won in the ward. We changed the ward structure. We went from being nowhere on the map to actually with this Krasner election, we were the 3rd or 4th highest turnout ward in the city. So we were not on that list until this time. And part of that was just that we rooted ourselves in our neighborhoods. We got trust with our neighbors. And then we weren't in this situation where the 2nd ward would make some endorsement. We would have to fight against that endorsement. Now the endorsements are ours. This ward endorsed Larry Krasner for victory, and he won by 75%, so outperformed even the rest of the city, where he did about 66, which is still pretty good. And so, I would just encourage people who have been part of campaigns, and even campaigns that have not won. I mean, I started because of Bernie Sanders, who did not win, but left an infrastructure and left a movement in place. Think about your local committee person positions. Think about what it takes. If you don't know your local committee person or your state committee person, it's possible that they're not doing their job effectively. I mean, what you actually need is a committee person who comes to you around election time, canvasses door to door, and boosts turnout, and listens to your concerns, and then moves votes accordingly. So I would just encourage people to do that. The last thing I will say is, we were able to make a very big change, even endorsing a non-Democrat for city committee. I mean, actually, Rep. Rabb, who was on this call, was a pioneer in this effort when a number of us supported Kendra Brooks, who was a Working Families Party candidate for city council. So we knew that was consistent with our values, and frankly, consistent with the values of the party that we wanted to build, that we would support someone like Kendra Brooks for city council against a Republican, frankly, let alone against a kind of mediocre Democrats, which we often also want to challenge. So I want to say that we've built it up over time. It changed what the conditions when I ran for state senate. So I just really encourage everyone to do that. I'm glad to talk more about it in due course. But thank you for having me.
Thank you, Nikil. Wow, what a wonderful blueprint you provided us. And we appreciate all that information and especially all your hard work. And it is paying off big time. So thanks again. So let's see. So next, I'm proud to introduce Representative Chris Rabb from Pennsylvania House District 200. Chris is also a father, educated, author, and social justice activist. In 2010, he authored Invisible Capital: How Unseen Forces Shape Entrepreneurial Opportunity. He was recruited to teach at Temple University's Richard J. Fox School of Business and Management, where he was the Social Impact Fellow at Innovation and Entrepreneurship Institute, and taught social entrepreneurship and organizational innovation. In his fourth year of teaching at Temple, he helped to successfully unionize his 1,500 fellow adjunct professors, and I know that wasn't easy. He is currently a board member of Friends of the Wissahickon and Race Forward, and has been on the faculty of the Institute for Strategic Leadership at Drexel University's Bennett S. LeBrow College of Business. He's been a fellow at Demos, the Poynter Institute, and the German Marshall Fund of the United States. He served on the boards of the Bread and Roses Community Fund, Mount Auburn Cemetery, the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper, which was founded by his great-great-grandfather in 1892. Amazing family of activists and accomplished leaders in Pennsylvania. He's a former U.S. Senate legislative aide and writer, researcher, and trainer at the White House Conference on Small Business in the Clinton administration. Representative Rabb is a thought leader at the intersection of politics, media, entrepreneurship, and social identity. Wow, what a wonderful life you've been living, and thank you very much for your work, Representative Rabb, and I'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here, and that is an old bio and a very long one, so I have nothing to say. Just kidding. For moving forward, I want everyone, now that we've virtually met, so that we know each other, to call me Rep Rabb. That's how my friends call me in politics. So call me Rep Rabb. That's Rabb like rabble rouser, so you'll never forget. I'm honored to be here, and I'm one of those progressives that wasn't supposed to have won. I was supposed to have been crushed by the machine. Nick Saval wasn't supposed to have won. Helen Gim wasn't supposed to have won as city council at large back in 2015? Yes. Larry Krasner wasn't supposed to have won back in 2017. Kendra Brooks wasn't supposed to have won in 2019. And here we are. The machine is a paper tiger. The machine is a paper tiger. And I know because I just resigned as the ward leader with the highest voter turnout. We had 89% voter turnout this past November. And we're doing the work in a lot of different ways. But progressives, we need to represent, we need to collaborate, and we need each other when it matters most. We're seeing what's going on overseas, and the type of vitriol I've received by speaking up for my Palestinian sisters and brothers has been worse than all of the hate mail and all the hate I've received as a Black elected official in the Trump administration, just within the past 6 days. Progressives, we need to stand strong for one another, and that requires doing the work in between election cycles. And I know I'm on the campaign side. I much prefer the policy side, the nerdy, wonky legislative side, but it also includes the grassroots organizing side too. That's not just for elections. We need your help in between election cycles. And it's important to understand that the candidates we seek to support who have progressive agendas, that they must evolve into public servants. Being a candidate is one thing, Doing the work in government, in the legislative process, or in the executive branch, or in the judicial branch is another. They're related, but they are very different. And being able to walk the talk once those people have been elected to office, right? The ones who got all the support from the progressive base, the ones who've said all the right things, it's now their opportunity to do the right thing and be progressives in elective office. And that sometimes is a very lonely position to be in, very lonely. And that's when we need you the most, because that's when we're making the type of votes that matter. That's when we're deciding where money goes. That's when we're deciding policy in a larger tent of other Democratic electeds and raising our voices when it matters most. That's why I started the House Democratic Equity Committee, to make sure we look at social equity through all the things that impact what we do as state legislators. That's really important work. I'm not waiting for the next election cycle to speak up and talk about my progressive bona fides. I'm doing it every day, and I can do it more and more boldly and more consistently, along with Senator Saval and others, with your active, vocal, and strategic support. And then when I say support, I do not mean money. I do not mean money. I mean raising your voices, showing up in those rooms at the appropriate times in the appropriate ways to raise hell, to strategize behind the scenes to get stuff done. This is the work. And so before our next election cycle, how are we helping the progressives who we're already proud of, who are in elective office, do the work we need to do and push back against all of the nonsense? And guess what? We know a lot of that nonsense is produced by fellow Democrats. And if we don't speak up within our own party, for those of you who are like me, registered Democrats, whether you're holding your nose and saying that or not, we have the responsibility to speak up and say, no, I don't care that you have a D behind your name. What you're saying is wrong. Whether it's the messaging, the language, the framing, the voting, the priorities, the funding, all of those things matter. And we have to connect the dots between governance and campaigning and governance. It is all interconnected, but these are different parts and they have to be respected in different ways so that we can be as efficacious as we need to, because this is on us. We are on the right side of history. We know what needs to be done, as difficult as it is, but we also know that we've done it before. And if it weren't for progressives in previous generations, we would not have what we have today, which is not nearly what we deserve. But without us doing what we do, it'd be far worse. So I'm always available to strategize around how we can organize within the Democratic Party, understand the ward system, particularly for folks in Philadelphia. I'm on the state Democratic State Committee, which is aggressively dysfunctional. I can talk about that and so many other issues. And I just want to end with this. We have to walk the talk. And as progressives, we need to make sure that we center our work around liberation, and that we cannot have any meaningful conversation around social equity and justice without talking about racial justice. And in light of the anniversary of the killing of George Floyd, it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we do not shy away from these difficult conversations of race, ethnicity, et cetera, and that we make sure that in the candidates that we back and support and recruit, that they are reflective of our values and demography of the places they seek to elect. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Robb, for those very inspiring words.
Rabb, like rabble rouser.
Yeah, really. We are ready to go. Thank you so much for all your work over the years, and especially today. And again, you have given us the roadmap, and we are going to follow it. So thanks again. And next, let me introduce our last speaker, Bethany Hallam, who is Allegheny Council member and commissioner at large, representing over 1.2 million residents. She was born and raised in Ross Township in northern Allegheny County and currently resides in Pittsburgh North Side. She's serving her second term on her local Democratic committee and her first term on Pennsylvania's Democratic State Committee. Bethany was elected as one of the first formerly incarcerated persons in long-term recovery from substance abuse disorder and uses her position on Allegheny County's Jail Oversight Board to advocate for those who are still incarcerated. Thank you so much for your work, Bethany, and for your tremendous accomplishments. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Karen. I'm sitting over here and I'm still reeling about all the victories that we had here in Allegheny County on Tuesday. Not only did we elect Rep. Rabb's colleague, Representative Ed Gainey, to be the first Black mayor ever in the city of Pittsburgh, but we also had progressive wins up and down the ballot. We elected 5 of a slate of 8 that unite, which is Representative Summer Lee's PAC, put forward as criminal justice reform-minded candidates to the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas. We elected progressive magisterial district judges all over the county, even in areas where they said that the old school blue dog Democrat could never be defeated. And we have a unique landscape here in Allegheny County where we have 130 separate municipalities all within Allegheny County. Every single one of those municipalities has their own borough council or board of commissioners, and half of those seats were up this year alone, and we elected progressives all over the county. We flipped majorities that were held by Republicans to not just be Democratic majorities, but progressive Democratic majorities. But when we celebrate the wins, we also have to talk about the losses as well, because I had a race that was very near and dear to my heart with a progressive county council challenger, and we came within 1,800 votes in the only county council district that was won by Donald Trump in 2020. We have borough council members who shifted the narrative, although they may have been challenged by leftist candidates who weren't able to pull off the victory. The incumbents had to change their narrative and move their policy platforms to the left because of the threat of the challenge. And so even when it looks like there were losses that were had, they were still victories in their own way. So I want to start off by just remembering that I know we probably all have candidates that we supported this cycle who did not win, but remember that it's so important that we're always running progressive challengers in every single race, because at the very least, at the end of the day, we held the incumbent, or we held the Republican, or we held the establishment Democrat to a higher standard than they may have ever been held before. So, it's so exciting to hear from Rep. Rabb and Senator Saval across the state and hear that a lot of the work that we're doing here in Western Pennsylvania is going on everywhere. Within the next couple of weeks, we are about to launch the Allegheny County Independent Democratic Committee, recruiting people who have been volunteering on progressive campaigns for years now and running them for county Democratic committee seats all over the county. And at the same time, running them for state Democratic committee seats all over Allegheny County as well. And so we have such a unique opportunity that we have a groundwork that we've seen, and not just in 2021, not just in 2019 when I was elected, not just in 2017. For years, we've been electing progressives all over Pennsylvania and not realizing that this foundation that we were building can do so much more, and that this is just the beginning. When we see Trump supporters getting the Democratic committee endorsement, or people being able to buy Democratic committee endorsements because they had $1 million to throw in a campaign, where the average funding of another candidate in the same race was $30,000 to $40,000. When we see that that's what's happening with the party structure that exists currently, we know that there's a need for change. I've personally had many friends who were on the local Democratic committee who quit because it wasn't progressive enough. And so the battle has been convincing them don't quit yet. We're just getting started, and we're bringing you allies, because that was the biggest lesson that I've learned just in the past year that I've been on county council, is that there's a lot of people who you're never going to be able to convince them to see the humanity in the causes that you're pushing forward. You're never going to change their mind about social justice issues or criminal reform, justice reform issues. So if that's the case, we're just going to run people against you. We're not going to waste time anymore trying to change your mind, but instead we're going to replace you with someone whose views align with the work that we're doing already. So I'm so excited to be here today. I'm amazed by how many people are here on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, just ready to get back to work, because, you know, as Rep. Rabb mentioned, it never stops, right? I remember the day after the 2020 election, and it's like, oh, you mean there's another election coming up? When I'm talking to my neighbors twice a year, every year. And we need to make sure that the Democrats that we do have, the ones who are out doing the work, realize what the potential is when we don't stop. When as soon as one election ends, we're already planning for the next. Whenever our primary elections are over here, we're going somewhere where they need help for the generals. And just the work never stops, the recruiting never stops. And hopefully electing progressives to seats up and down the ballot all over the state, and realize that the co-governing process is the best way to truly reclaim the power for the people of our communities. And I'm just so excited that we're getting more and more people every day with that mindset, ready to hit the ground running. So I'm glad to be here.
Wow. Once again, thank you so much, Bethany. Your words, like our other two speakers, are just so thrilling, inspiring, and we will be there for you. And thanks so much for all the work you're doing, tireless. So I guess I turn it back to Chuck now, or no?
At this point, we're pivoting to
audio.
Hey, did I say anything else?
Hang on, everybody. We'll get there.
Jeff, Kristen, you okay?
Yeah, we're great. I am trying to actually fix that, but I think somebody may have muted. Okay.
I think it was Jeannie Bickmeyer, yeah.
Hey, you know what? We've only been Zooming for how long? Anyway, it's come to our part of the program. Sorry about that. Welcome to everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Coming to you from my studio here in my humble second bedroom here in the Saucon Valley, part of the Lehigh Valley. I'm Jeff Kennedy, host of The Kennedy Effect. We air live every Sunday evening from 5 p.m. on my Facebook page, That Other Side of Information, on global radio on hot101.net. We also post the Our Revolution Pennsylvania page, the national page, and about 80 to 100 other places all across the Facebook universe, YouTube, and so on. The real brains behind the operation is sitting to my right, to your left on the screen, because she is left of me, is Kristen. And this is the round table part of our program, the part of the program that I think we really enjoy, because it gives us a chance to have a free-flowing, casual, relaxed conversation, throw a couple questions out, get some ideas, and have a discussion. So thank you for that. I also want to remind you, we continue to be live on Facebook. The formal part of the program will continue to be there until we finish at around 1:30. But the Zoom room, this room, will remain open after 1:30 to continue the discussion. So we start our discussion with our guests. You want to use the sample questions, or do you want to risk me taking it?
Go for it.
So I will, let me start with Bethany. I'll be a little old fashioned, ladies first. As we watch the proper disintegration of the Republicans, I don't generally refer to them as a political party anymore. I think they're a corporation. I think the people that are involved in it, the elected officials, their sole job seems to be to transfer wealth to the stockholders, which would be the 1% and the big corporations that own them. That leaves the United States with one functioning political party. It happens to be the Democratic Party. Our party is not perfect. It's partly why we're here today and what we're here to talk about. How important is it, instead of potentially continuing to fight outside of the Democratic Party, to get inside the Democratic Party and work from within and make it a more friendly place for progressives and, dare I say, New Deal Democrats, which I think is all progressives are anyway, that we happen to believe in the country that we used to have before Reagan. Tell me about getting inside the party as opposed to just lobbing rocks from outside of it.
That's a great question. When I first ran for office, I had many sleepless nights trying to decide, do I just want to burn it all down, or do I want to get within it and try to fix it in the way that I know best and working within the existing structure? I do see a future that there is a more progressive party outside of the Democratic Party that is successful and can be a major player in politics. But I don't think that we're there right now. So while we're where we are right now, we need to work within the existing structure, because I do think that there are people who are within the existing structure who are just looking for someone to be their ally, are ready for the fight, have already had these viewpoints, but maybe thought they were the only ones that did. So I think it's important that we show that the support is there and teach people how to organize. A lot of people have great ideas for policy and for recruiting volunteers and for, what they want to see the future of their corner of the world to look like, but they don't know how to organize that all together into successful campaigns, into successful governing. And so having a structure that is a safe place for folks to go, where they know you're going to be accepted here, you're going to learn how to take your ideas and put it into action, and you're going to realize that this model can be replicated in areas where Democrats who lived there thought that they were the only one, that none of their neighbors could possibly be of the same mindset of them. So I do think that we have a great structure that exists. We just may have to replace a lot of the pieces of the foundation in order to get it where it needs to be.
Well, and I guess that then kind of raises a question that is more targeted to Senator Saval and Representative Rabb, which is, what do you feel that the public most misunderstands about how government actually works and how you can affect change in government? Oftentimes that is an issue that we see a lot. People are frustrated with a lack of change, but are advocating for change often maybe to people who don't have the ability to make the change that they want.
You want to go, Senator?
Sure. I suspect our answers will be pretty similar. And I'm relatively new to it, but at least in the last, I was elected last year. But I would say that there are two sides to this. One, as someone who, and speaking about Harrisburg in particular, that state government, one of the things that I found that was unusual, was strange about Harrisburg, and this was, as someone who's, like a lot of people on this call, just relatively well-informed and active and paying attention, that it was actually completely mystifying what it is that they did from day to day and just how things were accomplished. And I often would just feel like something happened in Harrisburg, and then you learn about it, months after it happened in the newspaper. And then it's just this demoralizing experience. Like, oh, they had $170 million in rental assistance and they spent $100 million on the Department of Corrections. Is that what that happened? And you're like, why did that happen? And the experience of that is obviously it's enraging, but I think what I worry about that kind of knowledge is that it's actually just dispiriting. Like, it's just like, well, and it frustrates effort rather than inspires it. And so that there's that part of it. And then also, frankly, within Harrisburg itself, even though we are all on the inside, as it were, even for us, there's things that we don't know. But, there's actually a kind of like separate sort of power structure, leadership, or what have you, that we're ourselves trying to penetrate and wrap our heads around. So all of which is to say, none of that is to be like conspiratorial or whatever. It's just the nature of people who have been in power for a long time, who have certain leadership structures. It's penetrable. It just is going to take a lot of work by a lot of us. Like one of the things that I often say to people, because I came from organized social movements and things like that, I'm on the inside now. I'm your man on the inside, as it were. And so I'm, part of my role, I feel like, is to just make clear what it is that's happening. And to the extent that we need organized pressure and spotlights and people to actually people to feel the pressure in Harrisburg, which frankly they often don't. They don't often feel the heat, I think, in the way that they should. It should have been happening way early on, that people were it should have been clear that something was going on wrong with this rental assistance money. That's like, for example, right? And then actually something was moved. People were being moved. If they're not moved, they're not going to do anything. Like, it's just like, and there's this tendency towards lassitude and just this inertia, and that that's for that can be applied to a number of Democrats as well. And so I just feel like the pressure does work. I mean, it's we need more of it. We need it more. We need it in more districts. We need it across the state. But I mean, just to speak to, Rep. Rabb was elected a few years ago. I mean, just his election already changed the temperature in the room, and then there are now sort of more of us, and it's not enough. We need more, right? But I would say that I think, Rep. Rabb spoke to the loneliness of it. We're a little less lonely, I would say, and so a little bit more freedom. And so and also people pay attention more, I think, because you have more people like the representative and, and Summer Lee and Rep. Innamorato and Rep. Fiedler and Rep. Krajewski. And then in my chamber, Senator Muth and, and others like that who are just raising the temperature in the room and but really connecting it to social movements on the outside and bringing that pressure to bear. So all of which is to say, we just need more. We need more lights on what is essentially a black box, and we need more heat in that light.
Well said. Well said. You're right. Our responses are similar. And I want to publicly thank Senator Saval. It is much less lonely with strong progressives like him. I had a great, I call them strong reinforcements in 2018. We had Lee and Innamorato and Fiedler, et cetera. It's not just having more Democrats, because more is not better when the Democrats who are elected are more conservative than my liberal Republicans in my own neighborhood of Mount Airy in Northwest Philly. The D does not matter. I mean, it matters, but doesn't matter as much as we would like to think. It is our actual politics. So I'm going to put, I have a very sophisticated graph I'd like to put up. Here it is. All right. So that's one axis. That axis is politician, public servant. Here's the other axis. This axis is show pony, workhorse. Everyone look at Senator Saval. Everyone look at him. He's up here. Workhorse, public servant. There are people who are Democrats, whether they're from Philly, whether they whatever hashtags they may use, who are show ponies and politicians. Politicians seek to serve themselves. They are self-aggrandizing. Public servants do the work for the public good. There is a difference. If you want to offend me, you call me a politician. It is an honor to be a public servant, and I love being a nerd. I love being around other nerds of all kinds. We need that. We need to make sure that we have more workhorses and fewer show ponies. We have more public servants and fewer politicians. Nobody likes politicians, including myself. That's one of the reasons I ran, because I was tired of politicians. Listen, I need to make this clear. This is how you identify a politician. This is how I identified it. And I don't know if, Senator, if this was your experience, but when I first came to Harrisburg after I won, a fellow Democrat came up to me who didn't know me from Adam, didn't know any, knew that I, beat the establishment and all of that, and said, hey, they start looking around. This is how you game the system. This is how you get more money and more stuff, and I'll hook you up, incumbent to incumbent. Right? That's what mattered. The politics of entrenched incumbency. is the real ideology that runs Harrisburg that we are pushing against. The public servant that came up to me when I came to Harrisburg for the first time said, tell me a little about yourself. What issues are you interested in? What's your background? What's your community like? Who are the constituents you represent? What do you care about? Those were the public servants. They were not talking about the benefits and the per diems and the insider influence and all of that. But the senator and I are indeed insiders. But there are concentric circles, and we are not in the inner circle of insiderism. What I like to say is I'm an insider with the key to a lot of doors, and I have the keys because I'm an insider. I don't have to ask permission, and I unlock certain doors that other incumbents do not want us insiders to unlock.
Yeah.
And you have to use us as insiders for those roles, because if you don't use us, the other insiders that you would access are ones who do not care about everyone who's on the outside. So part of our strategy has to be to protect those progressive insiders, in quotes, so that we can optimize our position of influence to help all of you. It is a dynamic that is not easy, but if you're just going to assume that because we're progressive, we are not insiders, then that's kind of delusional. And two, you're losing the opportunity to leverage resources and access that we have earned, rightfully so, to help folks more than just ourselves on the inside. And sometimes that's a hard thing for people to pivot on, because it's always about, it's anti-authority, anti-institution, as opposed to transforming institutions. We can make institutions as we see them in our collective heart, in our collective vision. And that will take time, but we cannot afford to just be contrarian and be oppositional, because ultimately we'll never be satisfied with anything. And those types of conversations do not happen nearly enough. And I know the senator and I, we need a lot of help in Harrisburg. And a lot of that is going to be working from the inside out and the outside in.
I want to try to combine a couple of questions if I could. And since, every guest had a chance to speak, I'll throw it open and I'll let you guys battle it out. What if we talk about inside and outside, and we'll be doing a presentation on this after the roundtable, so stay here for that. How important would it be to form an actual progressive caucus inside the legislature? Would that, and in combination with one of the questions that we got in the chat, would such a move hopefully raise the profile of the work that you and the folks here are trying to do when it comes to the press? I started my program because there was quite literally no live progressive media anywhere in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and we continue to be kind of it. Do you need a progressive caucus? Do you want one? Would it help? And would it raise the profile of the issues and work that you are trying to highlight inside the party and inside the legislature? And I would even, if I could stick in an extra grain of salt there, why is there such a disconnect? I was born and raised in New Jersey. My grandfather was one of the most powerful Democrats in the state of New Jersey. Why is there such a disconnect between, it seems we have a camp over here of the elected officials and the committee people over here, and never the twain shall meet? Can anyone?
I would love to address that if I may.
Jump on it. And by the way, I have tried to reach out to all three of you to be on my program, so I'm going to do it again right here in front of everybody.
And I will accept publicly. That's
take that.
Not a hard
take
ask.
that.
Yes.
So please tell me what progressive caucus, the lack of media attention you get, and why such a disconnect between our committees and our elected officials.
Okay. Form follows function. What is the functionality of a progressive caucus? In Harrisburg, and I can speak on the House side, there's 203 of us. It's the largest state legislature in full-time legislature in the country. All you have to do is send an email to leadership to say, I'm starting the iPhone caucus, and you have a caucus. So what? To what end? I'm concerned that we have a progressive caucus, we're easier to marginalize. I mean, it's not like people don't know who we are. There's not many of us. We stand out like a sore thumb. Just look at our voting record. Look at what we introduced. Look at what rallies we speak at. Look at how we organize. You know the progressives. And all the legislation is publicly accessible. All of the rallies and organizing we do is on social media. So I don't believe that a formal caucus will significantly improve anything, because back in the day, and I worked on Capitol Hill for a bit, before Newt Gingrich had the contract on America,
War on America.
Caucuses actually had budgets from Congress. They were part of the infrastructure. Newt Gingrich dissolved all of that, not just on the D side. He dissolved it in concentrated power. In Harrisburg, you're not guaranteed any resources at all to create a caucus. So we have essentially a de facto progressive caucus that has grown with the likes of Senator Saval and others. So it's being engaged and connected to those of us who are doing the work. Having that formalized structure doesn't give us the money or other resources to do what we do necessarily any better or any more strategically, and in some ways actually can hurt us, because some of the things that we need to do need to be quiet, right? You don't want to advertise everything you're doing. I was able to sneak in super commie pinko lefty stuff into Republican bills. I didn't advertise it. I didn't put it on social media. And then one of my Republican senators stole my bill and was lazy enough not to read the bill that she stole from me. And it included all the lefty pinko commie stuff. That wouldn't have happened if I sent out a press release through the Progressive Caucus. They would have stripped it out or not used it to begin with. So in many ways, strategically, there are other ways of doing it than having the caucus. Now, if you all want to fund a caucus, maybe, but you don't need our permission to do that. And frankly, this organization can serve as a complement to the work that those of us in Harrisburg do. And it requires greater communication and collaboration, which goes to your second point, Jeff, around this disconnect between Democratic committee people statewide, folks on the Democratic State Committee, and folks in office. And I talk about this all the time in Democratic State Committee. They're just interested, they're campaign addicts, and they don't seem to talk about policy. Not really. They don't honor the work that's been done by those of us who are in elective office, particularly the most progressive of us. They don't mention that stuff because there's not a lot of consensus around the work we do, frankly, because so many Democrats are afraid of their own shadows. And they're not going to speak up for our undocumented sisters and brothers, our queer brothers and sisters. They're not doing that necessarily. And so as a result, we have this disconnect. It's a lot of fun for folks who love campaigns, but who are bored by governance. And I don't have a lot of love for those folks, because this is not a hobby. This is not an avocation. This is people's lives. I am literally in a state where a couple hundred years ago, I would not be considered a human being, because in Pennsylvania, slavery was the state law. It was the law of the land until starting in 1780, where we had gradual abolition. And we had a poll tax until 1933. We had a constitutional amendment to the Pennsylvania State Constitution in 1838 that said, oh, all those black men who were free, who were allowed to vote for the past 50 years, we're going to strip them of that. This is not a hobby. This is not an avocation. This is people's lives. And we need to take this very seriously. And so we don't need any proxies, caucuses and such. We need the actual thing. And you all are doing that. You're doing it also in media, which is another question I saw. Corporate media controls the narrative unless we allow independent media the flexibility and the power to do what it does so well. And we need to listen and honor those folks in independent media so that we know that the real narrative is not what's being spun by what most folks consume.
And then I guess
I'll add on. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to add on to that. My issue with the concept of a progressive caucus is who defines what progressive is. I know people who are progressive on environmental issues and not at all progressive on criminal justice reform issues, progressive on abortion access and not progressive on the death penalty. So who would define who is progressive. My opponent, who was a 20-year incumbent, could not be more entrenched in the Democratic establishment when I wiped the ground with him in our election. But he ran as the progressive champion. That was his tagline. And so I see people all the time, they think it's a buzzword, progressive. It's a buzzword to them, and it's not about policy. It's just like, that seems like the cool thing to do, and I'm not a Republican, so I must be a progressive. And so that would be my concern with a progressive caucus is what exactly does it mean? And then the disconnect with the Democratic committee party and the actual electorate is something I'm unfortunately all too familiar with. After I won my race, I started circulating a petition for the Allegheny County Democratic Committee folks to hold a countywide committee meeting, which we do not do. We haven't done in nearly 2 decades. There has not been a convening of the entire Allegheny County Democratic Committee. And why is that? It's because with a quorum, we could change the bylaws. We could elect new leadership. With a quorum, we have power. So intentionally, those who have been leading the committee don't want the people to actually have the power that they were elected to have. And then also what I see, at least here, and I just based off conversations I've had at state committee with folks from all over the Commonwealth, is a lot of the seats are vacant because no one even knows what the Democratic committee is, especially at the local level. But an even bigger problem to me is that a lot of those seats are actually appointed. So for folks who aren't super familiar with the way that the committee works, is it's a male and a female from each voting district in your county, right? And so we have 1,323 voting districts in Allegheny County. That's almost 2,700 committee members if all the seats are filled. At least half of those seats, no one's ever run for. The ones that are filled, they're people who were appointed by the leadership. And then the problem with that is that they stay there and then they get appointed after the next election. They had never even collected the 10 signatures needed to get on the ballot to run for your local Democratic committee. And a lot of them have been on the Democratic committee for 40 years. 40 years ago, it was a sign of social status, right? They're doing it for the clout. A lot of the times it was how you got a well-paying union job was you had to be on your Democratic committee to work your way up and get that job in the union, at least here. That is a lot of the people that I talked to. That's why they got in the committee. And since they got that union job that they still have to this day, they have never done another action for their Democratic committee. Most of the committee members that I know, and again, there are some amazing ones, but most of the people that I know, they truly believe that their only job as a committee member is to vote in the Democratic Party endorsements. And that is, to me, the smallest thing that is the job of a Democratic committee member. Your job is to be the liaison between your elected officials and your constituents in your neighborhood. That's why they are organized based off of voting precincts, is because it's your neighborhood and you are that connection for them. You are the one keeping them informed. And so it's, that's where I think the disconnect is as I think it was Rep. Rabb who mentioned earlier, if you've never seen your Democratic committee member, maybe you should run against them because that means they're not doing their job. And so if we have committee members who are doing the actual duties, and maybe it's the job of the party to outline better what those duties are, not just showing up and voting in an endorsement vote, whether it's at the state committee or county committee level, but find out what those duties are, define them, and then anyone who isn't completing their duties, they shouldn't be on the committee, especially if they were not elected, they were appointed to that seat, which so many folks are. That's what I think causes the greatest disconnect. And I can tell you that there are a lot of people who consider themselves involved and informed about politics that have no idea to this day a Democratic committee exists at the county or state level.
Yes, I think you raise a very valid point. I know I grew up in the center part of the state in Center County. And one of the neighboring counties, the issue that they faced was that they had so tightly written their bylaws that to be able to do anything in a meeting, they had to have quorum. And the county membership had diminished over time. They were never going to meet quorum. So for an extensive period of time, they were having meetings where basically they would all get together and, the chair would start the meeting and say, well, we don't have enough to reach a quorum vote. So there's not much that we can, effectively do. And we can't even rewrite our bylaws. So yeah, there is a lot of just kind of arcane minutia that is kind of getting in the way. Yeah, but I thank you all for joining us today, and we would love to have you stick around. We do know, though, that it is a Saturday and it is a beautiful day outside. So if you have to jump, we want to thank you for joining us today. So thank you, Senator Nikil Saval and Representative Chris Rabb and Councilmember Bethany Hallam. We hope that you enjoy being here with us today and that you'll come back and talk to our revolution.
Please know that now that you're here, you broke the wall. You're part of the family. You are always welcome here. Our Revolution PA meets every Sunday and Wednesday night. My program is live every Sunday night. I will be inviting all of you. Our Revolution meets, our Revolution National, Hal will correct me if I'm wrong, and I appreciate that he does it, meets Monday nights, always has an excellent presentation. You're part of the art. Well, Rep. Rabb reminded us that he was the first PA candidate endorsed by Our Revolution back in 2016 and again in 2020. You are all part of the family. Please don't be strangers. We know you do a lot of Zooms and you have a lot of meetings and you have very busy calendars, but please know that the door here is always open to you. You are part of the family now, and please come back and see us. Don't be strangers.
Yes. And I'll just throw in, as Jeff mentioned, we have a call every Wednesday and Sunday night at 8 o'clock. Tomorrow night, we'll actually have a special guest with us. There is a student group called Pesci Defenders who are working to either delay or stop the consolidation of 6 of the public state universities. And so Nick, one of the representatives, and hopefully 1 or 2 other students will be on our call tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. And we will put that link in the chat. I think how it's in the show flow, and it will also be on a card at the end of this presentation. So thank you again to Senator Saval and Representative Rabb and Councilmember Hallam. It was lovely to have you with us. And I'm going to throw it now back to Chuck, who's going to talk about our Revolution strategic vision for 2021 and beyond.
This was stuff the other. Let's see.
Hi,
So
everyone.
this-
Hi, everyone.
I need the current
Capitol Hill, we're a
screen share to end so I can use my screen share. So there you go. Thank you. Thanks for staying with us, Bethany, if you're able to. Chris, really wonderful. Really inspiring comments. Look forward to working very closely going forward and developing really more thoroughly this inside-outside strategy that I'm going to go over briefly as a way to kickstart the continuing conversation that we need to have of connecting power from the outside onto the inside. We have to grow a massive movement on the outside, and that's what history does teach us. One of the critical pieces I use is the NV database over at Swarthmore College. It's a nonviolent database, .swarthmore.edu. And you can see there are more than 1,000 successful revolution and reform campaigns over the last 100+ years. We're talking about ending apartheid in South Africa. We're talking about the women's pots and pans movement in Iceland that created a feminist government in Iceland, and through the banksters on the most distant island that exists within the island, within the nation of Iceland. So these campaigns can work, and they have worked. We've just lost touch with it, I believe, as Americans. We've lost touch with our civil rights roots and the way that we were able to achieve success when people came together across race lines, across class lines, across ethnic lines, and even religion lines. One of the problems, I think, in progressive politics is that people don't want to talk about religion and the role of religion, but religion is a very important networking social justice forum. And so when we look at the Poor People's Campaign, when we look at William Barber, when we look at the roots going back to Martin Luther King and prior to that, we've got to incorporate, I believe, the spiritual nature of progressivism, or what I call justice for all politics. So maybe just to address your point, Bethany, about the difficulty, the challenge of progressive, which has become sort of a hollowed out term, I use the expression, we start with justice. the conversation needs to start with justice, because unless it's centered on justice, giving people a real shot, an opportunity, access to education, clean water, voting rights, up and down the spectrum of issues, until we actually do that, we're not going to win. We've got to make it about justice for all, and that becomes much more substantial. It becomes much more real. And when we say justice for all, we mean all, because I know that even the expression justice for all rings hollow in certain communities. We have to make sure that we do the outreach and that we not expect people to come to us, but we actually do the outreach work necessary to make our politics successful. So really, really inspired by the words of all three of you today to really launch this discussion. So I want to pop up here, let's see, continue this document, if I can. Let's see, where is it? I had it up before. Come on, Chuck, you can do this. Here we go. Can you see this? Okay, so this is a document I went over a couple months ago, but I just want to put out the outlines here, and then I'm going to share a whole document with you that kind of spells out in a little bit more detail and substance what these things mean. And for those of you who have gone through this sort of strategy building process, I've spent the last 3 years talking to strategists across the country. And in fact, I was on a call yesterday, which connects up and reinforces what Rep. Rabb was talking about. I was on a call with Alex Lawson. Some people may know the name Alex Lawson. He's the director of a group called Social Security Works, which is really arguably the leading edge of grassroots progressive inside outside strategy building in Washington, D.C. And I think that Alex I want to bring him over here to have a conversation with us so that we can learn about what's working over there as he couples up with justice groups, Indivisible, a whole variety of organizations to actually build strategy to win. So the first thing that I focus on in talking to any number of people is we have to first envision success. We have to understand what success looks like. Pull this window that's a bit noisy outside. We have to see what is it that we have sought to achieve? What is our success vision? What is our vision for success? And then the process begins then of unpacking or reverse engineering. What did we do to get there? That's the process of envisioning success first. What does a justice for all world look like? The second thing is understanding what is strategy. Most people think they know what strategy is, but in fact, most people are engaged in tactical thinking, small thinking, incremental thinking. But we need to be big picture strategists. We need to think in terms of what is the most successful, and I think Chris used the word before, efficacious way of moving forward. What is the best way that we use our time and our limited resources? And that goes toward the next steps, which is, many of you are familiar, of course, with SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We have to figure out who we are. We have to have an honest discussion about who we are and what we're up against. What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunities? What are our challenges? We have to have that discussion. It's got to be an honest discussion. The next thing is just linking our progressive issue campaigns to what I call daily justice issue campaigns. And I work primarily in the world of healthcare justice as the president of One Pair States, as advisor to Healthcare for All Pennsylvania. On Sunday, we have a strategy group. And then, of course, over here at Our Revolution, Pennsylvania, is that we need to connect with communities that are adversely affected by issues regarding housing, food, gun violence, over-policing, ground level pollution, schools. We've got to connect with those communities. And what does that look like? Well, it means we build relationships. And the way you build relationships is you go to other people's spaces. You don't expect them to come to you. You go to them. And you present yourself in a humble way, because we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. It needs to be, we need to build respect, trust, hope, and empathy. And I mean empathy. Empathy requires work. It's not sympathy, it's empathy.
Okay, Chuck, I get you.
What's that? Somebody had a comment? In any case, developing.
Is he asking me?
He's asking somebody, I guess.
Somebody unmuted?
Yeah, JP, you're not muted.
Sorry.
I told you.
Okay. So another aspect of strategy, I don't know that it was talked about earlier, but we need to develop new leadership models, right? And new models of leadership. We as Americans have this great tendency to look to a savior, right? A figure, a Bernie Sanders, a Martin Luther King, a Bobby Kennedy, what have you. We need to, in fact, understand as Bethany and Nikil and Chris have all illustrated, and the lives that they're leading, is that we all need to look in the mirror and see ourselves as potential leaders. I think that was raised in one of the comments earlier. It might have been with Chris, is that we've got to translate our activism into leadership. We have to translate our activism on the outside into leadership and power on the inside. We've got to see the connection between the outside and the inside, and not be put off, by the sort of unsavory perception that people have of politics on the inside. We're not going to get change unless we connect the two. So we need to think about new leadership models. Our communications. I know that it was talked about earlier. We need to think about how we communicate internally as well as externally. We have to make sure that we're clear in what we are saying, that our language is very carefully thought out. Language matters. We need to communicate in terms of values, our shared values. We need to incorporate the power of story, the power of experience. That's when you get into the heads of people. That's when you get into their hearts. Most people communicate through their hearts, in fact, not through their head. This is the political brain. Drew Weston is a neurologist who's written about politics. And he says that the vast majority of us are emotional when it comes to politics, that we're not rational. We're not rational thinkers. We're not, like Chris said, we're not policy wonks. Most people want to know, what is it going to mean for me? What is it going to mean for my life? What's going to mean for my neighbors and my family? People want to know that what you're doing is going to be substantive and it's going to change lives. So we have to connect to people's hearts, even more so than their heads. And the communication process is most effective when it's done peer to peer. Not me going into a Black church and making a presentation on universal healthcare, Medicare for all, single payer, but actually developing an entire cadre of people who can be surrogates and do outreach into all these different and various communities. Peer-to-peer communication, and then media and media platforms. We still need to be smarter about what we do on social media and our effectiveness at doing that, and also making sure that we repeat ourselves, that our language and our frames and our discussions are reinforcing. Also, we need to identify, define, and call out our enemies. We need to be clear about that. And that doesn't mean embarrassing people. It doesn't mean shaming people, but it actually does mean defining what it is that we're up against. We have to identify our opponents, some of whom, of course, are within the Democratic Party. We have to know how to negotiate and deal around the edges, but we have to be clear and honest about what it is that we're up against. Organization, I'm going to whip through this last part very quickly. We need to take a look at our organizations. We need to understand how we work. We need to understand what's necessary in terms of staffing and resources and defining roles and responsibilities, and also decision-making. Ideally, it's always going to be bottom up, but that's not always possible, especially when you're dealing with urgent decision-making processes. Ideally, bottom up as opposed to top down, but more often than not, it's going to be hybrid decision-making. And then to underscore again, internal communications. We have to make sure that we're communicating well among and between ourselves in order to keep things going forward. And then development speaks to questions of fundraising, in-kind resources distribution, timelines. It's important to develop timelines so that we have short-term successes, mid-term successes, and long-term successes. Because people become demoralized if you're not achieving things in the short term. They give up, they lose energy, and they walk away. So it's important that we understand that there's a distinction to be made between what I call good incrementalism and bad incrementalism. It's good incrementalism to get masks to frontline medical workers. It's good incrementalism to get bulk purchasing of pharmaceuticals before we ultimately get to single payer. So people, the word incrementalism has come to become a sort of a derogatory word, but in fact, there's such a thing as good incremental change, short-term, mid-term, long-term goals. We need to measure what it is that we're doing. We need to quantify it. We need to qualify it. We need to define it, what it is that we're working toward. This is all part of the strategy building process. And then finally, what I started with, we need to win on the outside. We've got to win on the outside in order for our allies and our friends and our cohorts to win on the inside. And the question is, what does that look like? And that's the longer question, the bigger question. So is that my time allotment for today, Chris, Kristen, and Jeff? You tell me.
Yeah, we're now going to throw it to Lisa Longo, who was a chief data strategist or organizer for Obama for America. She is also a political consultant and advocate. So Lisa, whenever you're ready.
Great, thanks, Kit. And I think there are some slides that you guys are going to put up. We're going to talk a little bit about transforming the party, and it's really great following up on what the Senator, Councilwoman, and Representative Rabb had to say. So how do we transform the party, and more importantly, why? What is going on? And you can go to the next slide. So there's this idea that we have that nothing changes if nothing changes. And it's a really important concept. And for us, I think we need to start with this idea that the Democratic Party itself needs some infrastructure changes for us to move forward our progressive policies. And I loved what Rep. Rabb had to say. We already are insiders, and that is so true. And we are already making a difference. We need to recognize our own power. And what Chuck was just talking about, you know, some of these steps to real change are already in place. Next slide. So I want to just introduce this concept that there are two sides to politics. There's the public and the private. The public is what we're all aware of. Those are our elected officials, the state representatives and senators, members of Congress. But there's this whole other side of politics that is the party. And that is what I call private politics. How do our elected committee people, what Councilwoman Hallam was talking about, how do they impact things like endorsements? And that's super important. Next slide. So what are the things the Democratic Party is not telling us? And I think in 2016, the conversation started when people accused the party of putting their finger on the scales for Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. And it's really what our revolution has now focused on is how does the party impact these primary races? And why do we continue to see establishment candidates seemingly win over progressives? Although certainly in Pennsylvania, we are changing that and we're seeing more of our progressive candidates win. For example, DA Krasner, that was a huge win in Philadelphia. Next slide. So the first thing the party does not tell us is where does all the money go? Right? The DNC and even the state party raise millions and millions of dollars, and how are they spending it? I know we have Chuck Black on this. I saw him on here. He'll look at campaign finance reports and he'll tell us, you know, they're spending a lot of money on consultants. And what are these consultants doing? We don't know. And as a former member of the state committee, I can tell you that when I tried to question how money was being spent, I was basically blacklisted and ultimately removed from my state committee position, even though I was the top vote getter here in Chester County. So the people elected me, and a few people on state committee decided they didn't like what I was doing, questioning how they spent money and other things. So I'm no longer on state committee. And that's part of this dark side of politics that I hope we can expose here. So where does the money go? Next slide. So here's what party politics does and how they spend money. Candidate selection and support, the endorsement process, and staff. Who is making these decisions? Why are they making these decisions? And are they making these decisions in an open, transparent, and democratic manner? One of the things I said at the last state committee meeting I attended as a member was that the operations of the Democratic Party in some ways were the least democratic organization I have ever been a part of. There are decisions that are being made without a vote. And according to the bylaws, they don't need a vote. So it's not that they're doing anything wrong. They're just not doing it in the way that we as progressives who want full transparency would prefer. So one of the things we really need, and I'm excited to hear from Councilwoman Hallam that they're starting this independent committee. How do we select candidates and how do we help find new candidates to run? How do we build our bench? And for me, a lot of you know me know I'm going to talk about school board. I really believe that's where we build the bench. The endorsement process is the next thing we really need to examine. In a lot of ways, endorsements have become popularity contests, and they use this false narrative about electability to go with one candidate over another. But as we have seen time and time again, if we overcome that electability nonsense, we can elect progressives, activists, people of color, people who aren't millionaires. We can really change that with grassroots activism, and that's where it's at for us. And the final question we need to look at is staff hiring. The money we donate to the party is used to pay staff. Who is making that decisions? Who is being hired? One of the things I've been looking into is James Carville. He made all those comments about, being woke doesn't matter and being progressive isn't necessarily good for the party. Well, he's been a paid consultant of the DNC for a long time. So I would like to know how many millions exactly is he being paid to get up there and spout this nonsense? And I think we should all be asking that. The next slide. So here's a synopsis of what happens in 2022 and why we need to run committee people. So every precinct in Pennsylvania, we elect 2 committee people. Those committee people come together to form the state committee, to form the county committee. We also elect separately state committee members. The county committee then elects the county leadership. The state committee elects the state leadership. These positions come with, according to the bylaws, a lot of power. Our county committee automatically gets a seat on state committee, and that state committee chair automatically gets a seat on the DNC. And in the past, in Pennsylvania, they actually appointed DNC members. Last year, we had the first election that was supposedly a free and open DNC election. But what we saw was the state party put out their preferred slate. And again, it was in essence an endorsement, and their slate, with the exception of one person, was elected to the DNC. Next slide. And I'm going fast because I know we're at the end of our time. But in 2021, we've got important elections in November, the judicial, county, and local. So everyone here, one of the things we need is that ongoing election and candidate and campaign support on both the issue side and the campaign side. So if you want to get involved, the pitch from Our Revolution PA, we have these Wednesday and Sunday meetings. We have online call tools. The online call tool was out there for helping re-elect DA Krasner. I think it made a big difference. Next slide. So one of my big pitches to you, school board, we are now seeing QAnon and very racially biased people running for school boards. Here in Chester County, we have a Democrat running for school board who actually was forced to resign for using a racial slur in a Zoom meeting. She's now running for school board as a Democrat. We also see QAnon people, people who were at the January 6th insurrection running for school board. And what we need now is for people to become aware of this, start attending school board meetings. You don't have to be elected or even running. You can make a huge difference just by paying attention. Why do school boards matter? I talk about this a lot. First of all, in many areas, school districts are the largest employer, and therefore we set the wage base. When I was president of our school board, it was brought to my attention that the superintendent, without board knowledge, had cut maintenance workers' pay by up to $3 an hour. And when we found out about it, our board, we not only got that money back, we retroactively gave that money back. So you need to be aware of what's happening. We're also the largest energy demand in most areas. So again, when we went to geothermal in 2 of our schools here, we set a standard. We also saved taxpayers $70,000 a year. We're the largest purchaser of food and supplies. We added that we wanted local and organic food in our school menu. We did that as part of policy. And finally, outdoor field maintenance and construction projects. A voice at the local level to go to renewable and sustainable policies, everything from the chemicals we use on our fields to the cleaning products we're using in our schools. This is so important. And so I'm going to beg you all, find out who's running for your school board. If there's an open seat, consider running as a write-in, but even more importantly, consider attending the meetings. Next slide. And just in closing, we hear a lot of arguments from our opposition about how public funding wasn't meant for this or that. Well, I always go back to the founders, and I'm going to tell you that Thomas Jefferson, way back in the 1600s, talked about using taxes to pay for free public education all the way through college. And so we need to go back to our roots and remember, we are community organizers, and so were the founders. They were all rabble-rousing community organizers and progressives. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to turn this over to the next part of the program.
This is Jonathan Fox. Am I next? Can you hear me?
Yes, Jonathan, this is all you.
Yes, I can hear you, Jonathan. Jonathan, I can hear you.
Wonderful. I want to say thank you to everybody that's in attendance, especially to our presenters and our 3 great elected officials, which will lead me into thanking Lisa for laying the groundwork on what we need to do. If you look at the party election slide, 2022 is going to be a big year. First, we're going to focus on all the elections this year, like all the school board races, especially, because all politics is local. But we also need to focus early on getting every precinct elected 2 committee people. As Bethany Hallam pointed out, throughout the state, there are either vacant seats or seats that are filled by party cronies from certain county parties. So I would beseech everyone in each county where you live, where you do your work, to start recruiting new people, progressive people, to fill those committee seats, because the committee is the one that endorses the state committee slate. I was on state committee a decade ago, along with being a board member of Keystone Progress. I found that my time was better spent on Keystone Progress. Plus, I had a friend, Bruce Slater, who wanted to join state committee, so I thought he was a logical successor. And yes, together, 10 years ago, we organized the Progressive Caucus at state committee. And to the point that people made about policy, like Representative Rabb, we did push through policy issues like banning fracking. And at least on 2 occasions, Dr. Pinocchio can vouch for this, we pushed through single payer resolutions that would, of course, were poo-pooed by the lame elected officials who we need to replace. So how do you replace state committee people that aren't into a progressive agenda? You get people elected at local committee levels. You get those people endorsed and elected next year during the primary. And then we focus on who's running the state party. If we have enough state committee backing, we can have an ample voice, if not completely take over the party in Pennsylvania like they've done in Nevada. So with that in mind, tell all your friends and associates and colleagues, your fellow travelers, if you will, that we need to infiltrate the tent. And I beg you all, and know that you all are ready to do so. So thank you, and I'll send it back.
All right. Thank you so much, JP. And I'm going to finish off the live stream portion of this program, I believe. And Jeff, jump in if I'm wrong. But the Zoom call will continue. So you will be able to continue your chat with these amazing organizers who are so impressive. And I think Chuck said it best. He was talking about strategy. And that is the long-term vision and how to get there rather than a short-term victory. And of course, we have had these great victories like District Attorney Krasner and the folks on the call today, but that's part of a grander strategy, which is to have truly progressive governance where every individual's rights are vindicated, where everyone is protected, where everyone has health care, education, and their ethnicity, their religion, their race is honored. That is what our long-term strategy is working towards, and that's why we are fighting for great candidates and policies here. If you get a chance, we'd love to have you join us as a movement builder, help us continue the fight. That's at https://ourrev.us/PAMEM. The PA is for Pennsylvania, of course. Hope you can take care of that business if you can, of course. And then we've got the, and Kristen, you're going to be talking about this a little bit, the PASH defenders. This is a really big deal. Wednesday and Sunday calls. Do you want to jump in real quick on this, Kristen?
Yes. So the public universities in Pennsylvania are governed by a commission, essentially. And the commission, along with Republicans in the state legislature, are proposing the consolidation of 6 of those universities into 2 universities, essentially. It would take 3 universities in the West and 3 universities in the center part of the state and combine them together. The PASH defenders are a student group that formed. Their concerns are the elimination of faculty, the increase in tuition, and also students being forced into a situation where the only way to complete your degree is a hybrid education, which is on site and increasingly online. So if this is going to be a really important topic, it really is going to affect education across the state and outside the state. Pennsylvania is a college state. This is where people come to go to school. So if you are interested, please join us tomorrow night. We'll put the Facebook link for the event in the chat. And as Hal said, we have these calls every Wednesday and Sunday at 8 p.m. Thanks, Hal.
All right, thank you so much, Kristen. And just real quick, we've got a call tomorrow. We're taking on Amazon in Massachusetts. We are on Monday. This was mentioned by Jeff, our Organize to Win meeting. I'll be co-host, so if you get a chance, love to see you there. And on Wednesday, Maryland, my home state, and we've got 3 great progressive delegates, actually 2 delegates and 1 state senator on that call this Wednesday. You can go to ourrevolution.com to get information about all of those events. And I think that takes us just about to the very end of the live stream portion. But again, stick with the folks on this call if you want, if you're on Zoom. Karen, you're gonna take us out of here, is that right?
Hi again. So, yeah, I think this has been a wonderful meeting, and I really, really appreciate everyone who came, especially, of course, our elected, wonderfully progressive candidates, our senators. And so please stick around and help us build our revolution in Pennsylvania.
All right, we'll end with our chant, when we organize, we win.
We win.
One more time. When we organize, we win. Have a great afternoon, everybody, and enjoy the continuing conversation on Zoom.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be here too. I forgot to tell everyone that I ran on the writing ballot in True Pennsylvania in some spots and might have won it. I don't know. I'll find out more about that on Monday.